This video is about a political issue, and it's kind of a strange video in that it deals directly with an issue that is political, but I don't want it to be about politics. The reason why I say this is that I'm a Canadian, and the subject matter in here is strictly an internal matter for a country that is not my own, i.e. the United States of America. The United States has their own taxation policy, the whole thing, all internal U.S. Governance issues are strictly an affair for Americans. None of my business. Just want to make that clear. I'm not telling anybody or commenting in any way at all anything about internal U.S. politics. This is just sort of a historical / philosophical take on something that's just something that interests me. My biases will become apparent, but again, I'm trying not to take sides on something that's none of my business. It fascinates me, this Tea Party issue, and Canadians and Americans, or at least English-speaking Canadians, the two-thirds of Canadians that are not French-speaking, resemble Americans a lot, in a lot of things. We eat the same foods, we speak the same language, usually the same dialect of the same language, although there are some differences. Trace the same roots of our culture back to the British Isles. There's just an enormous amount that we have in common. But on certain issues, I think that we're very different, and one of them is the issue of taxation and government in general. The Tea Party movement is something that I think could happen writ small in Canada. In other words, there is a large group of people that believe that Canadians are overtaxed. I'm not quite sure the figures, but I believe that we pay about twice the level of overall taxes as the average American does. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I do know for reasonably sure that we pay a lot more in taxes than Americans do. But Americans seem to be a lot more resistant to the idea of being taxed at all than Canadians are. That's a generalization, but I believe it to be true. Now, first of all, I think that the idea of dissent, of grassroots organization, large demonstrations, that kind of thing is wonderful. I'm not going to comment or criticize anyone who wants to attend a Tea Party or who wants to talk about important issues or who wants to start bugging their elected officials. That's too bad for them if they don't like being bugged. Too bad for anybody who decides to put their name on a ballot, because it's the citizens' right and, I suppose, duty to keep pestering them all the time. So it's not that per se. It's just my view of the philosophy or the psychology that informs the Tea Party movement. I understand the idea that people are overtaxed, or people believe that they're overtaxed. Well, at the end of the day, it's difficult for a Canadian to agree that Americans are overtaxed unless we believe that Canadians are hyper-overtaxed. I can say that at least protesting against your tax load is legitimate. But what I don't understand is the belief that Americans' taxation system will lead to socialism. Because by Western standards, the American taxation system and the American governmental system is very conservative, very libertarian, one would say, and very laissez-faire and individualistic. And yet we see a large number of Americans who feel that things have already gone too far and believe that there's some sort of creeping socialism. I can't for the life of me see that. But I suppose if someone sees that it is there, then that's fine. But what that leads me to think is that people believe that there's some sort of hidden agenda in President Obama's taxation policy or the overall U.S. government's taxation agenda. In other words, is that which you call America being subverted? Do people actually believe this? Now, what I often like to study is the period, the very, very early period of the United States, the actual country of the United States. And one of the most fascinating periods is an era called, or an incident, or a period called the Whiskey Rebellion. It didn't last that long, I think less than a year. But it was a period wherein small-holding or landless people rebelled against the U.S. federal government because it was taxing whiskey, which was considered a luxury, and they needed to do that in order to pay off the loans that they'd taken out to help fight the British to get independence. Now, there was a revolt against that, which was put down by the more or less peacefully, actually, by the militia under federal control. And interestingly, though, one reads in that some sort of parallel with what's going on now, or at least I do with the Tea Party movement, in that a large mass of people believe that the U.S. government is kind of, in a way, out of control. I'm not saying that the Tea Party movement is likely to suddenly take up weapons. I don't believe that at all, or at least I have no reason to believe that. But the sense of disconnect does seem to be severe. And what really interests me about, say, the Whiskey Rebellion is that it seems as though the implication of that rebellion was that the American Revolution was betrayed even before it began, because the very same people that ended up ordering and administering the suppression of the Whiskey Rebellion were the same people that essentially made the American Revolution, or a large number of the people who essentially made the American Revolution. And it wasn't just about taxes. I know there was issues of federal government power and law and order and a number of things. But again, the question of governmental legitimacy and what powers the government actually has to use is central to the Whiskey Rebellion, and it's also central to, say, Barack Obama's health care legislation. And again, it's provoking the same kind of questioning of the government's legitimacy to do this. So it does fascinate me. It does fascinate me, this sense of I guess, catastrophism or something like that, the belief that things have really gone too far. This is something that I suppose pops up a lot in American history, not so much in Canadian history, but there are echoes of it there. Like the American Civil War was fought over the same issue, that the federal government was out of control. And it often looks as though there are people that throughout American history, it just seems to be a recurring theme in American history that there will always be a large constituency of people that simply have trouble accepting the legitimacy of a lot of the things that the federal government does. And again, Canada has a different political structure in that it more resembles, I would say, the old Confederate States of America, in that the provinces, Canada's states, have a lot more authority than America's states do, at least in relation to the federal government. It's a lot more decentralized political form. So again, the results of our history have been different. In the U.S., the power is mostly concentrated in the federal level. In Canada, it's kind of a lot more evenly distributed between the federal and the provincial, or you would call it state level. Even though, like I say, you do get a lot of questioning of the federal government, you don't get the sense of extreme disconnect that you do, as evidenced, as I say, in the Tax Enough Already, the Tea Party movement, and again, one of my favorite little parts in American history, the Whiskey Rebellion. That's my thoughts on the issue. It does interest me to watch this from the outside, but again, I hasten to point out the whole thing is strictly for Americans to decide, and I'm just commenting on it by someone who's interested, but who is ultimately on the outside and who really has no business telling anyone how to feel on the issue, at least as far as Americans go. Thank you.